Welcome to another edition of Willow World. My name's Joshua Ridley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Willow. Today, I'm joined by Skarpi Hedinsson. Skarpi is the CTO of SoFi Stadium. Welcome to the show, Skarpi.
Josh, thanks for having me. And welcome to beautiful SoFi Stadium in sunny Inglewood, California. I'm actually standing right here in the bowl, and so this isn't it's not a fake background or anything like that. This is the real thing.
What is your role?
I'm the Chief Technology Officer at SoFi Stadium in Hollywood Park, which means that I have oversight over anything that's related technology. Sort of my way of describing it, if it has a bit in it somewhere, then it's my responsibility. And so I oversee everything from the stadium infrastructure, what I would call the layer one infrastructure for our fiber and networking, all the way up the stack to applications and digital experience, along with some cool stuff like this video board behind me.
Wow, that's a lot of things. Considering everything's getting connected to the internet, you've got a big responsibility. So good you could join us today.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about the stadium, Skarpi.
Yeah, for sure, Josh. I mean, listen, we started this project almost 4 years ago, right? And for the last, I would say, 3 years, every day, we've woken up thinking about this project, gone to sleep thinking about it, and so in September of last year, we formally opened. Of course, with no fans, but we have played 20 NFL games here so far, and we are looking forward to hosting fans here in the not too distant future. SoFi Stadium is a massive project on a global scale. It's not only an incredibly large building with a capacity ranging from sort of 70,000 to 100,000 based on the configuration of the building, but it's also situated within a much larger development project or precinct where Mr. Kroenke, our owner, is developing residential, retail, and office space on a site that's 300 acres large, which is in the middle of Los Angeles, or in the South Bay, as we call it. It is a big plot of land. So tons of activity going on here in Los Angeles, here on this construction site, and the stadium is really the first thing to be completed and is going to be ultimately the crown jewel of the project.
Great projects like this one have vision, and it's an impressive vision. Perhaps you could express to our viewers the vision and also some of the events that will take place in this amazing precinct in the next few years.
I think it was always Mr. Kroenke's vision from the very beginning to really build a destination, a global destination, but a destination that we all think LA deserves, right? LA has not had a new stadium like this built in 100 years, right? Of this size, if you think about it. We have the Rose Bowl and the Coliseums that were built, prior to 1920, right? And so this is a very unusual undertaking in a city like Los Angeles, and one that was badly needed, right? And so it was always Mr. Kroenke's vision to attract the absolute best events and sports here. So we start with NFL football. It is our foundation. This stadium is home to two NFL teams, so the LA Rams and the LA Chargers. Each of them play at least 10 games a year, and so we host 20 NFL games every season. And then, on top of that, this is going to be a fantastic concert destination. So, if you want to play LA and you're a big stadium band, this is the place to play. And then on top of that, we have these big global events that are coming, right? We've got the Super Bowl in 22. We have what's called the college football playoff national championship game, which is for lack of a better word, the Super Bowl of college football. That's coming in 23. We're in the bidding to host World Cup games here as well in 26. And then we have the Olympics coming here in 28. And so the opening and closing ceremonies of the Olympics will be held right here on this field behind me.
That's amazing. And I've seen behind you an enormous screen.
Yeah.
And tell us about that screen. And also, Skarpi, maybe for our viewers, just talking to us what's under the hood in terms of the technology that's in this stadium.
Yeah, it was always part of the vision, right? I mean, it sort of has to. When you construct a stadium like this for a market like LA, what I would call the fan experience or the experience technology are very much a part of that vision, which means that how is seeing a sporting event, an NFL game or a concert in this stadium different than all other stadiums, right?
Yes.
And this is a big part of it. What I have over my shoulder here, that is the largest video board ever designed and constructed for a sporting venue. It's about 1,000 metric tons in weight, and on the center, if you will, the surface that's right behind me here, that is the height of a 4-story building, from bottom to top. And it is 360 degrees. It's got LED surfaces on the interior. It's got them on the exterior. So it doesn't really matter where you sit in the building. You always have this great view of the screen. So you could be sitting down low, and then you're watching basically the surface that's on the inside. Or if
Yes.
you are up in the upper decks here behind me, you are watching the surface on the exterior of the board, right? But
Yes.
it's an absolute game changer, Josh. This sort of technology has never been built before. It's a very clever design because it sort of brings the images closer to the audience than what we've had before. We also, in the superstructure itself, we have over 200 what we call center out speakers. So so the audio is always coming directly at you, sort of similar to what you experience in your living room when you're watching a movie, right? The speakers are right there. And then on top of that, we put all of our 5G millimeter wave radios in there. So we have this enormous connectivity inside the bowl. And I have a Samsung phone here. I was doing a speed test with Verizon, which is our flagship carrier, mobile carrier. And I was getting over 2 gigabits a second download speed from my mobile wireless phone.
Wow.
Right? And
Wow.
which is, in the United States, that's more connectivity than what 99.9% of all households have
Yes.
in the US or something like that. Just from sitting here with your phone, right? And so very clever design, very dense from a technology perspective, and I would say a game changer when it comes to presenting the sporting event for our fans.
And Skarpi, you make a very good point there, the game changer that the technology has enabled. Taking a step back, prior to getting involved on the SoFi Stadium, you had a very interesting career with Disney.
Yeah.
And one of the striking features for us as an organisation was to be working with someone that had done some pretty amazing things at that organisation to say, okay, right, well, we might be able to do something similar in bricks and mortar, in steel and in IoT devices. What really drove you in terms of that vision for the technology? Not just the screen, but the impressive technology that sits underneath and around the stadium.
I do have what I would call a different background for a project like this. I'm a computer scientist by trade. I come from basically the digital side of the house. I spent 18 years at the Walt Disney Company building direct-to-consumer digital applications, streaming services, etc. Right, and that's the technology mindset that I brought to this project, right? And so, even though bringing technology into brick and mortar, right, is very different than bringing digital technology to a consumer.
Yes.
It's the intersection, if you will, of digital and physical,
Yes.
which I was sort of fascinated by, right? Because it's so important right now, because not only, is the mobile phone, such a big part of the experience inside of these buildings, but, you can't really deliver on a differentiated experience like I have behind me if you're not thinking about the software and how you present the information and the entertainment, right? This is a very expensive piece of hardware, and we have a production and creative capability that's really the other side of that same coin to power it, if you will. And so I think that part of my career has served me well as I started looking at, okay, what are the technologies that are really going to make a difference in a place like this, right? And what should we be investing in? And that's sort of what brought us together, right? Exactly.
Yes.
When we started thinking about, what are we going to need from a technology standpoint, not just during the construction, but on what we call day two, when we get the building handed over to us, and now we have to operate it, we have to manage it, we have to be the ones that every day are optimizing and making sure that things are more efficient, right? And it's an enormous building, right? It's 3.1 million square feet in sort of the U.S. terms.
It's huge. And just on that basis, I remember meeting up with you on many occasions with our team, getting the yellow vests and the boots and the helmet on and walking around the site, and walking back and looking at my step count and realising that we'd done over 16,000 steps and just walking around the stadium.
Yeah.
Also, I feel during the construction phase, it was just a gigantic task to just build this building, but also the amount of information that was getting gathered through construction. Yeah. You coined the phrase, and your team, actually, we started using this phrase in terms of the way we engage with you, offline twin and then online twin.
Yeah.
And I think one of the areas that you talked to me about in the early days was you were staggered that it sort of didn't seem like there was a way to reduce the silos, reduce the vendor lock, and create the bigger opportunity. So maybe talking through our viewers, what drove you down the path of a twin?
Yeah.
And why did you feel it was important to start that process early in construction, or before practical completion?
Yeah. I think some of it has to do with I don't come to this project with any sort of prior experience in construction, right? And so I just view that problem like I would view any other problem when it comes to technology and ultimately information management, right? And information accessibility, right? You're absolutely right, because this project generates an enormous amount of information and data. Even sort of going back to the earliest days of design and
Yes.
engineering and all of those things, all the way leading up to, what we call in the U.S. all the submittals for all the equipment and installation.
Yes.
And just the reams of data and documents and all of that's created from there, and sort of
Yes.
I'll never forget sort of talking about how that traditionally is done, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
I remember.
we're gonna give you these binders that are full of
That's right.
CD-ROMs, right? And the
Yes,
CD-ROMs are gonna have PDFs on them, and I'm like,
yes.
what are you
No,
talking about, right? It's
right.
like that's not modern. That's not sort of what we want to do here. And I think, when we started talking, it was sort of immediately clear to me that not only was I going to solve that problem, which was
Yeah,
information management and the ability to sort of safely, for prosperity, store all of this information, um,
yes,
and then organize it. But the way that, and this is the brilliance of the twin, the way that we take sort of the three-dimensional models, right? The sort of visual representation of this place, and we merge those things together so that, I can virtually walk into a room and I can virtually locate a piece of equipment, and I can look at the maintenance record, or I can look at, the original submittal that shows me who installed it and what the warranty is going to be, right? And
yes.
and so it's not just sort of trying to be a librarian and store information
Yeah, so true.
in some sort of organized way. It's storing it in the way that humans actually want to access it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because even just the taxonomy around what we call, rooms in a building like this is complicated. I just want to be able
So
to
true.
say on level 7 in the northeast corridor, there's an AV closet, and I want to be able to virtually walk in there and look at the electrical panel, for example, right? And so
Yeah, and
that's how we think about, the environment, right?
that's so good. And what I'm hearing there, which is I think a really important point for our viewers, is that the system of record that may well be in a paper document, or even worse, on a whiteboard or in somebody's head, is now able to be accessed to be a system of reality. And I will never forget when we were in the shed near the site and we were talking through some of the use cases, and you said a staggering thing to us. You said, Josh, do you realise that we've got 70 elevators, we've got gazillion amount of escalators, and I have no way of telling whether the maintenance agreements are going to be right or wrong. I don't know. Could you help us with that? And I feel that the epiphany for us as an organisation working with you is we had the opportunity to solve real world problems,
Yeah.
set the twin up for those type of use cases. Talk us through the live data,
Yeah.
what we now are thinking
Yeah.
about once we've got the spatial, we've got that sort of beautiful static that's sitting within the spatial, and then bam, we get the live data.
Yeah, no, and we call them phase 1 and phase 2. Phase
Yeah.
1 being basically let's accumulate all this information. Let's take the hundreds of three-dimensional models that we had. Let's and you guys
Over 400,
Yeah.
400, I believe. Yeah,
you
yeah,
guys just did a brilliant job of basically layering all of that into a usable three-dimensional model that we can then dice and slice and peel away parts of the stadium and so get all of that sort of baseline information into the twin. And then phase 2 is all about saying, okay, what is this equipment saying? What are they talking? What is the chatter coming from the environment, right? If it's an air handler unit or a chiller, what's the power signature looking like, right? What is the BMS telling us about,
yeah.
temperatures in various rooms in the building, right? Is the elevator, running, or is it stuck? Is it in alarm, right? Or quite honestly, what is the flow of people going up and down escalators, etc., right? So this idea that all of the equipment, pretty much every single major system that we have in this building today is IP connected in some way. It runs on our enterprise network, right? and through gateways and other things, it is putting data out there, right? And so what we wanted to do is reach in, take that data and put that into the twin so that we could basically have a not just a representation of a piece of equipment that's virtual, if you will, or in the twin, but then we could click in and we can get the readout of that a piece of equipment. And so that, and there's the ramifications of that, Joss, are sort of endless, right? And in a positive way. You know, one thing is like if we needed to give someone access to that data so that, you know, for them to evaluate something or, you know, to run an algorithm on top of it, is that we can do that without allowing anyone into the network, without allowing anyone into the building, right? Which is today, as we all know, is a security risk, right? And so, so there's all these advantages from having a digital twin representation of the physical, environmental and operational space, right?
Yes. You know, you gave us a bit of a challenge. You know, I remember you saying to us, Josh, we love the vision, we got it. You know, we can see this gets us, like you just said, future ready. So we can be ready for all these new opportunities. But I want to see the return on investment. I want to see from the beginning, I want to see cases that show us real life how we're saving money, how we're, importantly, as I think you just said there, in terms of risk. And I'm looking at a roof behind me that is an astonishing roof. We're covered, the whole stadium's covered. And I remember seeing it being built. In fact, I think you took us on a tour one day and we stood on one of those girders up the very top and looked in. And actually that roof, as it happens, it actually is part of the screen is part of the structure holding that roof together. But one of the things I remember talking to you about in the early days was, well, how do you check the worlds today that are in those structural elements? And then how do you make sure that they are checked and verified? And one of the exciting light bulb moments for our team was that we can do that. We can verify that in the twin. We can actually show that those worlds have been checked and it's not just sitting on a bit of paper somewhere you can't find. Yeah. So talk us through and our viewers through how you sort of saw the need for a tangible outcome that then leads to, so that execution, and then that leads to the future.
Yeah, I think, you know, ROI and that tangible outcome, it's sort of multi-layered. It's everything from what I would describe as productivity enhancement for our staff, right?
Yes.
It's the minutes that we shave off of small tasks like looking something up, right? There's just an inherent savings from that. The other one is you know, preemptive maintenance, right? This idea that, you know, the possibility of understanding if a piece of equipment is at its, you know, useful end of life, right? Or, you know, is within a maintenance window. And so be able to go and service that equipment, you know, without it having to fail, right? And that has, you know, significant cost implications, right? And all of that, in addition to, quite honestly, Josh, things that I didn't even think about when we started in the early days.
That is the amazing thing, right?
Yeah, I mean,
the mind can imagine and create new opportunity. Yeah.
We had I think 48 people on a training session for the twin the other day, right? From sales, marketing, operations, guest services, ticketing, right? Sort of every single apartment across, you know, this big enterprise, and each one of them saw like different value, right? Even from the team that what I call sells the project or books events, right?
Yes.
And events can be, you know, a concert, but they can also be like a small corporate event or a private event, like a birthday party, right?
Yes.
The ability to basically go into the twin and just sort of fly around and show people spaces, take measurements, right? Without actually ever leaving your seat, And now, sort of under the COVID conditions that we all work, you imagine how brilliant that is, right? That I can actually walk around the stadium with a virtual tape measure and give a client, sort of millimeter accurate measurements on sizes and placement of stages and tables and chairs and things like that. So each one of these groups were seeing different value from the twin, right?
Yes.
Which was really fun, right? Because it was not necessarily things that you and I talked about, right?
That's right.
And then, from a data perspective, is like that real-time data, understanding the operational state of the building, understanding that we can put algorithms on top of that data, and we can get smarter about our environment. We can understand power consumption better, right? Integration of lighting control systems. We can, we talked about setting up playbooks, right?
Yeah, talk to our viewers about the playbook. I think that was one of your great ideas at the beginning of the process.
And we had our facilities and operations people, and they were sort of describing to us, it was sort of like a pre-flight checklist, right? They would take this binder down, and they would open it up, and then they were like, okay, I gotta hit these things on this screen, I gotta go over to that screen, and I gotta do these, and think of it as booting the environment on a game day. You gotta precondition interior spaces. You gotta make sure that your life safety systems are basically triggered and ready. And there's just enormous amount of work that they have to do manually. So this idea that, what if we basically could set up workflow or automation that allows us to do those things in sequence, and not have to rely on a human that potentially is prone to error to basically do all of that. That you sort of trigger that sequence, and then the system basically goes on its business and boots it up. And then we can do that with live input, right? So that we can also then see as the systems are coming on, turning green, etc. Right? So So once you have that data, once you have that baseline information, it's sort of endless, the application.
Yes.
Right?
And one of the challenges that we faced coming into the project, because it was, as I recall, we were in the last 12 months before practical completion, and so we were sort of coming in when decisions at, say, elevator companies had already been signed up. There was facilities management systems like 24/7 and other discussions that had already been had. And I think one of the challenges for any organisation when you're coming in at that stage is how do you integrate? And I feel that one of the areas which the collective between SoFi Stadium, your organisation and ours, we listed those out and we went through them on a progressive manner, making sure that the most important in terms of the use cases was prioritised.
Yeah.
Perhaps any insights for our viewers on if they're encountering sort of vendor lock or the new world I'm hoping that we're expressing here, perhaps you could express to our viewers, is that you don't need to go down that path of silos and vendor lock anymore.
I think the most important thing, Josh, is that the information and the data about our environment is ours, right? It isn't, it's not the vendors, right?
Yes, so true.
It's our environment, it's our equipment, right? And that data is ours and should be made available to us so that we can, efficiently leverage it, right? And so I think there needs to be a bit of a change in how we approach that, right? Listen, this is happening right now with what we call personal identifiable data, with laws and regulations like CCPA, which basically states that data that's about me is owned by me, right? It's not owned by Facebook. It's not owned by Google, right? It's actually owned by me, and I can control what Facebook can do with it, what Google can do with it, right? I.e., I can give them permission to use it, right? Or I can say, no, you know what? You don't get to use it anymore. I am going to
Right.
take control of that. I think we have to think about these environments in a very similar way, that the owners and the operators, this is their data. It's ours to figure out what to do with. And that's why I'm obviously having a system like this that can aggregate that data, that can normalize it, right? And make it more approachable. That's where that becomes really valuable. And I think
And Skarpi, sorry, you go.
No, I was going to say to your question about like, sort of trying to grapple with that. I think it is a change management problem, right? It is just a different way of going about it. And so within your organization, it's important for you to have champions, right? To have people, whether it's on, ownership, on the real estate management side, on the facility side, on the engineering side, that are bought in and see this value and are deriving it every day, and then in turn are seeing the value of it every day. I think if you can get that engine going, I think those problems basically solve themselves.
Yeah, so making sure that we're not creating another silo, and making sure that this information is being used by all the people you've described on the one hand, and on the other hand, making sure that we then have standardizations, the way in which we're labeling the data from the beginning, and open source standards that then can transverse any industry. There's been a lot of work done in the last few years, as you're aware, getting languages right, getting the labeling right, and getting the ontologies right. And so we've been a beneficiary as the twin company, Willow, providing that back to you. And I would say that the leadership in terms of the way you've thought about us and thought about others and saying it's our data, let's work together to bring that data to the surface, is a critical element to success. Skarpi, as we think about the future, as we think about ordering from your phone, all of these, safety even, like an active shooter, we think about the pandemic, we think about all of the opportunities that come from this through perhaps a marketplace or similar. You mentioned before the creativity, the imagination. Where do you see this going? What are the opportunities you would like to harness now that we've got that sort of baseline phase 2 in place?
Yeah, I've always described our environment here, the physical infrastructure that we built as basically a platform, right? That you have.
It's good thought.
You have in your platform certain capabilities, and it starts with the availability of data and information, right? It's literally, when you think about it, it's the core of any platform, right?
Yes.
And then on top of that, the ability to build applications on top of that platform to tap into that value. And so I think that's where we're heading, right? Is that we think about these environmental environments as platforms, and then be able to write applications that basically unlock and bring solutions to the forth, right?
Yes.
And the solution can be anything, from a dead simple, tell me if this room needs to be cleaned, i.e., was anybody in that room in the last 24 hours, to something really complex and saying, hey, alert me if the queuing outside of my food and beverage, points of sale gets too long, because I want to address that and I want to somehow move those queues through prompts or through deploying resources into that area, right? You can't really do any of that if you don't have, the metering of the environment that's underneath, right?
Yes.
And that's the critical piece. You need that infrastructure, you need that data, and then you can basically look at your environment and say, okay, where should I put down? What are the really critical things that we want to solve for? Listen, a really interesting thing about our building is that we've been open for a year, but we have never had a paying customer, right?
Yeah.
And so we don't really know how this environment is going to react to 70,000 people yet, right?
Yes.
And so But one of the advantages that we will have is we will just have access to better telemetry, to more data, so that when it comes to making course corrections and changes, is that we will not just have to rely on observation, right? Which is the old-fashioned way, which is that unless I see it with my eyes, it didn't happen, right? So we don't have to just rely on observations and response. We can actually see patterns and trends develop in the data.
So taking a step back, the cloud that you are partnering with is Google Cloud Partnership. Talk to our viewers about Google Cloud Partnership and what your vision is there.
We were lucky enough to have, what I really consider as a groundbreaking partnership with Google Cloud. We partnered with them on a 10-year partnership to basically drive technology and to sort of operate SoFi Stadium, Hollywood Park in the cloud on GCP, right? And so from that perspective, we are aggregating our data in Google Cloud. We're using, Google's world-class tools like their AI and ML capabilities, as well as their reporting and data capabilities to sort of drive our insights and to help us bring digital experiences to our guests and really engage our guests from a marketing and advertising perspective as well. So it's a really, really broad partnership, and we really look forward to marrying that to the twin, right? So that we have sort of both sides of that coin, which is the consumer insights that we get through GCP, and then what I would call the digital twin or the environmental insights that we have. And I think both of those overlays are incredibly important for us as we think not just about operations, but we think about revenue as well. So the business side of what we're doing here, and how do we drive value for this project.
As you say, marrying those two together so that we've got a complete data set, so that data intelligence, and as you said earlier, the marketplace of new vendors or new applications or existing can really leverage the information that's coming from that third layer, which is the twin.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that too, and the possibilities that will come through for years to come are all in front of us. Skarpi, you've gone through a very interesting year. Looking behind you, you've got 80,000 seats. None of them have been filled. In 12 months, we had practical completion on the project, yet it wasn't a normal practical completion because it was at the height of the pandemic. How have you sort of motivated yourself? How have you motivated your teams through 2020?
Yeah.
And what have been some of the things that have helped you through that you might like to share with our viewers?
None of us signed up for this, right? Certainly, building and delivering a stadium like this under pandemic conditions was quite the lift, right? But we were also lucky enough to have great partners, right? We were lucky enough to have really good and strict protocols because it was an open construction site, right? We were actually going to work every day, by and large, while the pandemic was in its sort of early stages, from what I would call from March to September, right? And so from that perspective, the cadence of a construction project really didn't change that much. We changed sort of how we interact with people. We moved all of our meetings online like everyone else, right? But at the end of the day, I think we did have I call it somewhat of a luxury to be able to get out of our houses, drive to the site, and really see and touch and keep track of our progress, right? And so from that standpoint, it was a little bit unusual as to other businesses and during the pandemic, right? But but listen, I think the things that we have learned, and I think are probably learnings that other people are taking away, is that people can be incredibly productive, right? Working remote, right? Using modern tools like the ones that we're using today, to interact, to share information, to connect, right? And
Yes.
I think coming out of the pandemic, we certainly are all craving to get back to, that environment, get back into our offices and interact. But I think we also are now much more comfortable saying, you know what, if I need to work from home, or if I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, I'm going to work from home. And we know that we're not going to miss a beat, because we all, are conditioned to working in that way. So I think there's going to be some really good benefits from that. But we built this place for guests, for fans, for people.
Yeah.
It's a place to gather. It's for a community, right? And and we can't wait to get people back.
It's such a beacon of hope and a vision of the future. Just as the sun rises in the morning, you can sort of see the day ahead of us when that's just sort of pumping with music, and you've got people in the stands buying and food and beverages, and you've got families walking around. And I'm very much looking forward to that day that I'm there with you in that spot looking down on a game, which hopefully isn't too far away. I'd just like to take this moment today to thank you, your entire team, right from Stan Kroenke through to everyone that we have engaged with over the last nearly 3 years. It has been the largest single project that we've ever done. We've never seen so many digital models, so much information. It's challenged all of us, but your leadership, your team's commitment, and the sense of humour in the chaos and in the difficult times was also a real motivating force for us. So I'd like to take this moment just to thank you, and to also reinforce the commitment that we've made to make this into the smartest stadium in the world. I'd also like to thank those other partners that have come along the journey with us as well, that have made this possible. Skarpi, if that's all from me today from Willow World, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to 2022, hopefully a big win for the Los Angeles Rams or the LA Chargers.
Thank you so much, Josh, and thank you for all the hard work from the team. You guys are absolutely brilliant.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Willow World. I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning into Willow World. You can watch all our past editions on Willow's Vimeo page. Visit our website for more information about how you can know your world.